uh, this expectation of absolute solidity, like precision.
Right, like engineering.
Exactly. You drop an apple, gravity pulls it down, the math checks out perfectly, and the physicist just points to the chalkboard and says, there it is.
Yeah.
That's reality.
Yeah, it's very neat and tidy.
But the closer you look at the observer, like at you and me, the ones actually watching the apple fall, the more that quote-unquote solid world starts to behave in an incredibly strange way.
Oh, absolutely. It completely falls apart.
And that scientific blind spot, that is the core of what we are doing today on this deep dive. We're exploring a 2021 presentation by Vinod G. Kulkarni. It's called The Science of Consciousness. And just to be clear up front, we aren't endorsing this as absolute undeniable fact or taking any sides here. We are just unpacking the ideas in the source material because, honestly, it forces us to ask a deeply uncomfortable question.
It really does.
Like, what if atoms don't create biology and brains? What if, this is wild, what if consciousness creates atoms?
Yeah, it completely inverts the standard model we've all been taught, like, since grade school. I mean, the traditional view, the bottom-up materialistic view, it assumes the universe is just humming along out there, completely independent of us.
Right, just dead rocks floating in space.
Exactly. We're taught that dead matter randomly bumped into other dead matter for, billions of years until it accidentally formed a biological machine complex enough to just wake up and wonder where it came from.
Which is such a wild concept when you say it out loud.
Mm-hmm.
But Kulkarni's presentation, it argues that if we treat physical matter as the unquestionable foundation of reality, we run into these impossible paradoxes when we try to explain human experience. The text calls this getting stuck in a stationary point of view.
Which is a brilliant way to frame it, actually. Think about human history for a second. For centuries, we had the geocentric model of the universe.
Oh, right. Earth at the center.
Yeah, the idea that the Earth was the stationary center of everything. And because they made the Earth their immovable anchor, early astronomers had to invent these incredibly convoluted, messy mathematical models to explain, why the other planets appear to move backward in the night sky.
Right. Those little loops, epicycles, I think they called them.
Yes, epicycles. They were literally forcing the math to fit a totally flawed assumption.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because Kulkarni is suggesting that modern science is doing the exact same thing today, but with materialism.
Precisely. By making physical matter our stationary anchor, we're forced to invent all these convoluted theories to explain how moving atoms can somehow generate the feeling of love or the sensation of time passing.
Or just the experience of seeing a color.
Right. So the presentation argues we have to look for the cracks in that materialistic foundation.
And once you zoom in, like down to the quantum level, it's not just cracks. The whole foundation looks like a sieve. I mean, we see this breakdown immediately with the double slit experiment.
Oh, the classic double slit. It is the ultimate thorn in the side of classical physics.
We've talked about it before, but it bears repeating because it fundamentally shatters the idea of an objective reality.
It really does. So when scientists fire quantum particles, like individual photons of light, through a barrier with two slits in it, those particles behave as waves of infinite probabilities. Well, as long as no one is watching them.
Right, they create an interference pattern on the wall.
Exactly, meaning a single photon essentially goes through both slits, neither slit, and bounces off itself all at the exact same time.
And this is the crazy part, the moment you put a detector next to the slits to measure which path the photon actually takes, the wave function just collapses.
Yep. It starts acting like a solid, predictable little bullet. It only goes through one slit. The observer is literally entangled with the experiment.
The source phrases this beautifully. It's not that human eyes have, like, magical lasers that alter physical matter. It's that knowledge about the system affects the system.
Right. The physical reality simply doesn't exist in a finalized, rendered state until information about it is extracted by an observer.
It makes me think of playing a massive open-world video game.
Oh, that's a good analogy.
Yeah, like the game engine on your console. It doesn't render the entire universe of the game at all times.
It'd crash immediately.
Exactly, it would fry the machine. It doesn't calculate the shadows of every leaf in a forest 50 miles away from where your character is standing. It only renders the trees and the light physics when you turn your camera to look at them.
And when you aren't looking, that forest isn't a forest. It's just a set of mathematical probabilities sitting in the code.
Exactly. And that maps perfectly onto this quantum framework. The system of our reality only renders a definitive physical state when knowledge is required by an observer.
Which completely breaks the classical concept of cause and effect. I mean, if the state of a particle is determined by the act of observation, then strict determinism, the idea that A always leads to B, goes right out the window.
The source even points out everyday examples of this, like the light coming from the LED screen you're probably looking at right now. That is the result of random quantum fluctuations. It isn't a neat linear cause and effect chain.
The unpredictability is just baked in, and the complications for the materialist view, they don't stop at quantum mechanics. They extend to time and space, specifically the speed of light.
Okay, wait, I'm struggling with this part of the source. The speed of light is like the most famous constant in science, 300,000 kilometers per second. How can we not measure it?
Well, we can measure the round-trip speed of light. You bounce a laser off a mirror, time how long it takes to come back, and divide by 2.
Okay, simple enough.
But to measure a one-way trip, you need 2 synchronized clocks, one at the starting line, one at the finish line.
So you just sync them up next to each other and then move one down the track, right?
But Albert Einstein proved that the very act of moving a clock through space changes its time relative to the other clock. Time dilation.
Oh.
So the moment you separate them, they are literally no longer synchronized. There is no absolute reference point in the universe to synchronize against.
Because time and space are entirely relative to the observer. There's no master clock ticking away outside the universe.
None at all. And if there's no master clock, it weakens the idea of a solid, independent material world.
Wow.
I mean, classical physics equations are mathematically reversible. They work backward in time just as well as forward.
But in actual reality, the arrow of time only flows one way. Entropy, chaos, it always increases. Coffee cools down, buildings crumble.
Right. The math of the physical layer does not align with the experience of the observer.
Which naturally leads to a huge debate in physics, because physicists hate the idea that the observer affects reality. It feels too subjective.
So they propose workarounds, like superdeterminism.
Right. Let's talk about that, because superdeterminism is wild. It basically argues there's no randomness at all, right?
Yeah, it's the ultimate materialistic defense mechanism. It posits that every single particle interaction in the universe has been strictly evolving according to predetermined initial conditions set at the exact moment of the Big Bang.
A giant cosmic domino setup.
A domino tipped over 14 billion years ago. It leaves zero room for free will. It suggests that your decision to test a specific particle and the result were all completely pre-programmed.
I have to push back on this. Because if everything is just dominoes falling since the Big Bang, how does anything ever change on its own? Where does the initial spark of creation come from?
It's a great question.
If there's no outside entity, no freedom to choose, then the universe is just a static block of math endlessly playing itself out in a dark room. The probability that the universe is exactly the way it is, perfectly balanced for life, completely by blind chance from a single explosion, it's astronomically small.
And Kulkarni's text agrees with your pushback. The source points out that superdeterminism conflicts heavily with most accepted quantum theories anyway. It's a desperate attempt to save the objective reality model, but it completely fails to answer the ultimate question. Why is there something instead of nothing?
Right. If matter is just dead atoms following blind laws, why did it bother organizing into something that can ask that question?
Exactly. And that limitation in physics naturally forces us to look at the next layer up, because if physics struggles to explain the observer, biology completely breaks a sweat over it.
Oh, for sure. To explain how we get from atoms to living organisms, the source introduces this concept, the layering of reality. Reality isn't a flat plane, it's stacked through emergence.
Emergence is the perfect word. Think about the properties of water.
Okay.
Wetness does not exist in a single hydrogen atom. It doesn't exist in a single oxygen atom. But bond them together, and a totally new property wetness emerges.
The new property relies on the base components, but its rules can't be found in them.
Exactly. And Kulkarni applies this to the whole universe. At the very bottom, you have physical reality. Atoms, forces, energy, galaxies. This layer operates with a low freedom. It's mechanical.
But it acts as a solid base for the next layer up, the life engine.
The biological reality. Bodies, DNA, senses. And suddenly, at this layer, you see new properties emerge that do not exist at the atomic layer.
Like truth, logic, goals, hunger, love. An atom of carbon doesn't feel hunger.
But a biological cell made of carbon does.
Right, and it doesn't stop there. The life engine acts as a foundation for higher conceptual realities, like economics, politics, trust. Atoms don't care about the stock market.
No, they don't. And biological monkeys don't care about mortgage rates.
But human consciousness does.
The crucial takeaway here is that every layer has its own unique building blocks and totally different rules. Each layer is not strictly dictated by the layer below it.
Think of it like building a computer. You start with the physics layer: silicon, copper, electricity. You can study that silicon chip under a microscope for 1,000 years, but it will never explain the rules of the software running on it.
That's a great analogy.
The physics of the microchip doesn't explain why a character jumps on your screen when you press a button. The software layer uses the hardware as a canvas, but it has vastly more freedom.
Determinism shifts as you move up. Physics is restricted. Biology is infinitely richer.
And that richness brings us to the limits of the genetic code and evolution. We're taught evolution is just random mutations and natural selection, slow, blind, mechanical over billions of years.
But the source points out glaring holes in that slow and steady narrative. The timeline simply doesn't accommodate purely random combinations, creating such staggering, goal-oriented complexity.
The Cambrian explosion is the prime example in the text. About 540 million years ago, in a span of only 20 million years, which is a blink of an eye, geologically, almost all major animal phyla suddenly appeared.
It wasn't a slow buildup, it was an unprecedented explosion of biological complexity.
And it happened with flowering plants, too. Complexity just leaps forward, which leads us to a piece of research in the presentation that is just staggering: Michael Levin's experiments.
Oh, yes. This is where the materialistic view of biology gets put in the hot seat. Michael Levin is a developmental biologist, and his work with planarian flatworms is revolutionary.
These worms are incredibly regenerative, right?
Very. Cut one in half, the tail grows a new head, the head grows a new tail. Standard biology says, okay, DNA has the instructions, cells divide, they rebuild.
But Levin went further. He trained these worms to navigate a maze to find food. They formed memories.
Memories which, according to the standard model, must be stored in the physical neural networks of the worm's brain.
Right, so he trains them, and then he cuts their heads off.
Yeah.
Completely decapitates them.
Removing the brain entirely.
So the headless tail just sits there, regenerates over a couple of weeks, grows a brand new head and brain, and when they put that new worm back in the maze, it still remembers how to find the food.
It retains the learned behaviors from before decapitation, which should be absolutely impossible under a strictly materialistic, brain-centric view of memory.
It's literally like throwing your computer's hard drive in a shredder, buying a blank one, plugging it in, and finding all your personal photos are magically already on it.
Yeah.
How is the physical matter doing that?
It forces us to reconsider biological development entirely. When a single embryonic cell divides to form a body, how does each cell know what to do? How does one identical cell know its spatial coordinate to become part of an eye and another a liver?
Because DNA is just a recipe book. It doesn't have a GPS system. It doesn't know where it is in 3D space.
Precisely. Levin's experiments show there is a centralized non-system control at play, a bioelectric field. Cells communicate via voltage gradients.
The source mentions that before a tadpole's face physically develops, you can measure an electrical pattern that maps exactly where the eyes and mouth will appear.
The electrical pattern pre-exists the physical form.
So DNA is just the bricks, but the bioelectric field is the invisible architect's blueprint hovering over the site, telling the dumb bricks where to go.
Yes, morphogenesis. It strongly suggests the biological system takes directions from a layer of information that sits above the physical cells. The cells are hardware, bioelectricity is software managing a goal.
Okay, so if memory and form survive without a physical brain, what exactly is the brain doing? How does it relate to our conscious experience? This brings us to the hard problem of consciousness.
Right, the transition from biological machinery to subjective experience. Kulkarni makes a fascinating observation here. Think about reaching up to catch a flying baseball.
Okay, I see the ball. I put my glove up.
Under the strict materialist view, your brain is a computer processing inputs. It calculates the parabolic trajectory, wind resistance, muscle tensions, and sends electrical commands to your hand.
But I'm terrible at math. I can't calculate a parabola on paper to save my life, but I can catch a ball without even thinking about it.
Because you aren't doing complex math, your brain is not a traditional algorithm-based computer. Neural networks don't represent reality as a clean database using strict logic.
We use the computer analogy because it's our most advanced tech. But the source points out a huge difference. Intelligence trumps entropy, specifically because of goals.
That is a vital distinction. In physics, entropy chaos always increases, the second law of thermodynamics. But biological systems consistently overcome entropy. They take disorganized matter and build organized structures because a goal drives them.
And the computer doesn't naturally have a goal.
No. Even the most advanced AI can't automatically generate its own intrinsic goals. A programmer has to define a loss function, and the AI trains to achieve that external goal. Mud and atoms cannot have a goal.
So where did the goal to become a complex human come from? What does it mean for a physical system to have an experience?
That's the hard problem. Can robots have experiences? Do simple animals? The source notes even a tiny blood platelet can be seen chasing a bacterium. Is there a spark of conscious experience there?
Modern neuroscience thinks experience is just the physical configuration of neurons. Pattern X equals happiness. But Kulkarni's text tears this down with how neurons process the color red.
Yes. What's fascinating here is, if you look at the brain's hardware, there are no different types of neurons for different senses. You don't have special vision neurons that look physically different from hearing neurons.
It's all the same wet wiring. Identical biological machinery firing electrical pulses.
So how do those identical pulses create the rich, vibrant experience of the color red? Or the unique feeling of hearing a loved one's voice?
It's the translation problem. Let's imagine a blind supercomputer.
Okay.
You feed it all the data in the universe about the color red. It knows the wavelength is exactly 700 nanometers. It knows exactly how light hits the retina, which proteins react, which neurons fire. It knows 100% of the objective reality of red.
But despite knowing the facts, that computer will never experience redness. It will never know what it looks like.
Because there is no one-to-one mapping between a physical wavelength of light and the pure subjective experience of seeing a color, redness cannot be communicated through an equation.
Science is restricted by its own methodology. It can only measure the physical layer, wavelengths, brain waves, heart rate, but never the experience itself.
So if the brain is just identical wet wires and experiences something completely different, how do we explain the observer? The presentation leans on computing, math, and Gödel's incompleteness theorem.
Ah, Gödel. Crucial for understanding why a materialistic brain can never explain consciousness.
What is Gödel's theorem in a nutshell for the listener?
In the early 1900s, mathematicians wanted to prove math was a perfect, complete system. But Gödel proved that any complex, logical system has a fundamental knowledge boundary. You cannot verify every truthful statement from inside that system.
Wait, math proved that mass can't explain everything? How is that not a paradox?
It is a paradox, that's the point. Any system trying to define itself completely ends up in a self-referential loop. To prove the ultimate truth of a system, you need an external platform, a meta layer.
Let's walk through the logic, the liar's paradox. If someone says, this statement I am making right now is false.
If it's true, it's false. If it's false, it's true. Infinite loop.
Or if someone says, I am telling you the truth, you can't verify it using only their words. You need outside evidence.
Kulkarni uses a television analogy. A TV screen can show movies, news, even a high-def picture of a TV screen, but it can never display its own physical hardware source. It can't display the microchips processing the image because the microchips generate the image. The content of observation can never define the observer.
Wow. So applied to the brain.
If the brain is the physical system, it cannot observe itself creating consciousness. If science says the observer is a creation of the brain, it's a tautology. The content of your thoughts cannot define the consciousness observing the thoughts.
Meaning, the true observer, the actual you listening to this deep dive right now, must forever remain independent of the physical system it's observing.
Verification always induces a higher meta platform, which brings up the question, if the physical brain isn't the meta platform, what is?
Kulkarni explores this using the phenomenon of dreaming and what computer scientists call a time-sharing CPU. I love this part. Think about being in a dream. You experience space, time, gravity, but how long did the dream actually last?
From inside the dream, you cannot answer that.
A dream that felt like a 3-day adventure might have been 5 minutes of REM sleep in the physical world. Time and space are relative to the experience.
These domains, waking, dreaming, they can't be neatly mapped onto each other. They're parallel states with no common physical reference.
And how does one brain manage this? The time-sharing CPU analogy. When you look at your laptop, it looks like it's playing Spotify, rendering video, downloading a file, all simultaneously. But a single-core CPU is just time slicing.
Switching its attention so incredibly fast, it creates the illusion of multiple programs running at once.
Kulkarni implies our consciousness acts similarly. The brain acts as a temporary cache, running multiple perceptions, cycling through them to create a seamless illusion of reality.
But the critical piece is the program counter. In a computer, it's a marker that tells the CPU exactly where it is in the code. The presentation argues that for humans, our attention is our program counter.
How we know where we are is purely defined by where we place our attention.
Pivotal realization. Because if attention and subjective experience define where we are, and the brain can't account for goals or the Gödelian observer, we have to invert our understanding of reality.
The grand synthesis, the top-down consciousness model. We've spent centuries trying to build consciousness out of dead matter and failing. The source proposes we start from the only thing we know for absolute certain exists: awareness.
A consciousness-based model of reality. So instead of atoms creating biology, biology creating brains, and brains generating a mind, the model flips.
Let's walk through exactly how this top-down model works.
It relies heavily on the superimposition principle. Reality is top-down. It starts with the real observer. Pure, unadulterated, non-objectifiable awareness.
It's not a thing. You can't put it in a test tube. It's the blank screen.
Right. From this pure awareness, creation happens. It creates an ego observer, your localized sense of I, your identity, your name. And alongside that, it creates the observed system, the physical reality. Then the ego uses the mind to interface with this reality.
Real observer creates ego. Ego uses mind. Mind perceives physical reality.
And this leads to superimposition. The physical world is just a blank canvas. The meaning, the experience, is superimposed onto it by consciousness.
Let's use money as an analogy. A $100 bill. In objective reality, what is it? It's just a rectangular blend of cotton and linen fibers with green ink.
It has zero intrinsic value in physics.
Like a dog doesn't care about it. If I give it to my dog, he just eats it. It only becomes currency. It only has power because human consciousness superimposes that meaning onto the physical matter.
That is precisely how Kulkarni views the entire physical universe. We have pure sensory inputs, like abstract sound waves, but the meaning of a symphony is entirely superimposed by consciousness.
Which leads to the boldest claim in the document. It literally states, note that there is only experience. Brain is a cache in this reality.
A profound statement that redefines our biology completely.
Let's dig into that. Say I decide to lift my hand to take a drink of water. Materialistic view says a chemical reaction in my brain fired, sending a signal down my arm. Brain is control center. But the source argues control doesn't exist in abstract physical reality.
Think about watching a movie. Is there actual control happening on the screen? When a character turns a steering wheel, are they controlling the car?
No, the film is just playing frame by frame.
So when you lift your hand, the control is happening without the physical mind. The true observer, pure awareness at the top layer, is the non-brain source of change. The brain is just a temporary storage space, a cache memory translating that choice into physical reality, likely through quantum wave collapse.
The brain doesn't generate the mind. The mind uses the brain like a person typing on a keyboard.
Which raises the philosophical question, why? Why create this elaborate illusion? The source suggests it's about freedom and creation. Pure potential at the top layer is absolute freedom. But pure freedom has no boundaries, no form, and therefore no experience.
Right. To have an experience, you have to create rules, limit yourself.
Every choice made to create a reality reduces available freedom.
Imagine owning a massive empty lot. Total freedom. You could build a skyscraper, a farm, or leave it empty. But you can't experience living in a house until you choose to pour a foundation.
By creating walls, you create physical limitations.
But those limitations let you experience the coziness of a living room. By creating physical reality governed by gravity and an ego eye bound by time, pure consciousness voluntarily limited its freedom to have a specific experience.
We are pure infinite freedom pretending to be limited so we can feel something. That is the essence of the top-down model.
So if we accept this paradigm shift, what does it mean for our daily lives, our health? This brings us to beliefs, the body, and moksha.
Well, when consciousness creates a domain, it wants stability. If reality changed rules every 5 seconds, you couldn't play the game. The most stable aspects harden over time. They become what the text calls beliefs.
Like religious beliefs.
Deeper. Physical laws are essentially the foundational beliefs of consciousness. The absolute belief that solid objects retain shape, or that two solid objects can't occupy the same space. But gases are allowed to mix. These aren't blind dictates of dead matter. They're stable rules chosen to make reality playable.
And this ties directly back into biology. Our physical bodies, basically every cell dies and is replaced over a relatively short period. The source notes a typical cell life is around 20 days.
Your physical body is a slow-moving river of replacing matter, the ship of Theseus.
Right. So if your organs are constantly swapping out building blocks, what keeps them the exact same shape? Why does a physical scar remain for decades when the actual skin cells have been replaced thousands of times?
Materialism says it's DNA memory. But we saw with Levin's worms, DNA isn't the whole story. The presentation argues the body is a knowledge process. Let's look at diabetes. The decision for pancreatic cells to produce insulin is genetic expression. But what drives the expression? The source implies it's driven by a deeply held belief or knowledge process at the subconscious level.
So our bodies are literally held together by consciousness's beliefs. We are a stabilized pattern of information.
Which means the knowledge we hold defines the reality we experience.
So if experience is a hallucination, even shared hallucinations like UFO sightings, and the ego is a limited program, what's the end game? What is the practical goal of all this?
Kulkarni points to a concept from Eastern philosophy, framed in modern context: moksha, enlightenment.
Because if we're programmed to see the world as solid matter and we think we're just a fragile meat sack in a random universe that doesn't care, we suffer. We fear death.
To escape that, the goal is pure knowledge, not book smarts, the ability to see directly, uninfluenced by one's own created programs.
Dropping the superimpositions, looking at the $100 bill and just seeing paper, realizing the drama of your life is a superimposed game.
Precisely. When you truly know the top-down nature of reality, you realize there is no personal identity the way we think. The ego I is just a cache, a temporary program. The true you is the ultimate self, the limitless awareness that created the game.
And because that awareness is the base layer, it cannot be canceled out by the physical rules it invented, which means no death.
The physical cache may clear, the biological body may dissolve, but the pure awareness running the program was never born into the physical layer, so it cannot die in the physical layer.
Wow. Okay, let's take a breath and synthesize this incredible journey. We started this deep dive assuming matter is absolute king. Physics dictates biology, dictates brain, dictates mind.
The stationary perspective.
But by looking at the cracks, the observer in the double slit experiment, headless flatworms retaining memories, identical brain cells failing to explain the experience of red matter, we explored a paradigm-shifting framework. A theory that says we didn't come from dead matter. Our deepest awareness created matter as a playground.
A shift from feeling like a helpless victim of a random universe to realizing you are the invisible architect of it.
As we wrap up, I want to leave you, the listener, with a final thought. Building on that computing analogy, think about the program counter, that tiny marker telling the machine exactly where it is in the code. In your life, your attention is your program counter. You only exist exactly where you place your attention.
It's the most powerful tool you have, entirely under the control of the true observer.
So as you go back to your job, your routine, ask yourself, who is really deciding where your program counterpoints today? Is it the external world demanding you look at it? Or is it the true observer, the pure awareness hiding quietly behind your eyes?
A question worth spending a lifetime answering.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Question the nature of your reality, watch where you place your attention, and we will catch you next time.